The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Davidson's mess hall as Captain Laura Bennett stirred a massive pot of oatmeal. Steam rose around her face, dampening the loose strands of auburn hair that had escaped her regulation bun. At 42 years old, she had 20 years of military service behind her 3 combat tours, 2 commendations for valor, and more field experience than half the officers on base. Yet here she stood, relegated to kitchen duty while recovering from a shoulder injury sustained during her last deployment. "Ma'am, the bacon's burning," called Private Martinez from across the kitchen, his voice tinged with panic. Laura moved swiftly despite the lingering stiffness in her shoulder, pulling the smoking pan from the burner. She'd been temporarily assigned to oversee the mess hall operations while the regular kitchen manager was on leave. It wasn't glamorous work, but she approached it with the same discipline she brought to everything else. In her mind, every task had purpose, every assignment had meaning. The young soldiers who filtered through for breakfast that morning barely acknowledged her. To them, she was just another face in the kitchen, someone who scooped eggs onto their plates and refilled the coffee dispensers. They didn't read name tags. They didn't ask questions. They saw the apron and the ladle, and they made their assumptions. Lieutenant Danny Crawford was the worst of them. Fresh out of officer training at 24, he swaggered into the mess hall each morning with 3 or 4 other junior officers trailing behind him like disciples. He had the kind of confidence that comes from never being truly tested, never facing real consequences. "Hey, cook," he called out that Tuesday morning, snapping his fingers at Laura. "This coffee tastes like dirt. You need to learn how to brew a decent pot." Laura looked up from the scrambled eggs she was preparing. She could feel her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. "I'll make a fresh pot right away, Lieutenant." "See that you do," Crawford replied, turning back to his companions. "I swear, they'll let anyone work in the kitchen these days. Probably some washed-up enlisted who couldn't cut it in the field." His friends laughed, though a few of them looked uncomfortable. Laura said nothing. She simply turned away and started a new pot of coffee, measuring the grounds with steady hands. She'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, that some people needed to learn their lessons the hard way. But Private Martinez had heard everything. "Ma'am," he whispered when Crawford was out of earshot. "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell him who you are?" Laura smiled softly, a sad kind of smile that held years of experience. "Because it wouldn't matter, Martinez. Men like that don't listen until they have to." The week continued in much the same pattern. Crawford and his group made the mess hall their personal comedy club, with Laura as their favorite target. They criticized the food, made jokes about her competence, and treated her like she was invisible except when they wanted something to complain about. "My grandmother cooks better than this," Crawford announced one morning, pushing his plate away dramatically. "And she's been dead for 5 years. His companions roared with laughter. Laura cleared the plate without comment. What none of them knew was that Laura had been listening to something else entirely. For the past 3 days, she'd been monitoring the radio chatter from the base communications center during her early morning prep work. There had been unusual activity in the surrounding hills, unidentified vehicles, suspicious movement patterns, potential threats that were being investigated by intelligence officers. Fort Davidson was a training facility, located in the high desert of Nevada, about 40 miles from the nearest town. It hosted officer candidates, specialized training courses, and occasionally served as a staging ground for units preparing for deployment. Security was normally tight, but Laura had noticed something troubling. The guard rotations had become predictable. The perimeter checks were being conducted at the same times each day. Someone paying attention could map the patterns, could find the gaps. She'd mentioned her concerns to Major Phillips, the base operations officer, 2 days earlier. He'd listened politely, nodded, and then essentially patted her on the head. "I appreciate your vigilance, Captain," he'd said, his tone making it clear he thought she was overreacting. "But our security teams know what they're doing. You focus on getting that shoulder healed up so you can get back to your real job. Her real job." As if everything else was just killing time. On Thursday morning, Laura arrived at the mess hall at 4:30, same as always. The kitchen was dark and quiet, and she moved through her opening routine with practiced efficiency. Check the refrigeration units, verify the food deliveries, start the coffee, begin prep work for breakfast service at 6. But something felt wrong. She couldn't quite identify it at first. Just a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. The same instinct that had kept her alive in Kandahar and Baghdad. She stepped out of the kitchen into the dining area, letting her eyes adjust to the dim emergency lighting that glowed along the baseboards. Through the windows, she could see the eastern sky beginning to lighten. The base was quiet, most personnel still asleep in their barracks. The mess hall sat near the center of the compound, surrounded by administrative buildings, training facilities, and housing units. Then she saw a brief flash of movement near the perimeter fence, about 200 yards away. Too quick, too deliberate to be a deer or coyote. She watched for another 30 seconds, and there it was again. Multiple figures, moving in coordinated patterns. Laura's training kicked in instantly. She moved back into the kitchen, her heart rate increasing but her hands remaining steady. She pulled out her phone and dialed the security office. The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. That's when she knew this wasn't a drill, wasn't her imagination, wasn't something that could wait for the chain of command to slowly acknowledge. Something was very, very wrong at Fort Davidson, and she was about to become far more than just a cook. Laura stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, calculating her next move. The security office not answering could mean a dozen things, but combined with the movement she'd seen at the perimeter, none of them were good. She had maybe minutes before. Whatever was happening escalated into something worse. She moved quickly to the kitchen's back office, a cramped space where the mess sergeant kept paperwork and inventory logs. Mounted on the wall was what she'd been looking for, an emergency communication panel connected to the base-wide alert system. It was rarely used, mostly tested during monthly drills. Laura pulled the protective cover off and reached for the microphone. Her finger hovered over the activation button. If she was wrong, if this was nothing, she'd be explaining herself to a very unhappy chain of command. Her temporary kitchen assignment would become permanent. Her career would end not with honor, but with whispers about the captain who cried wolf. The sound of distant gunfire made the decision for her. Laura pressed the button and spoke with absolute clarity, her voice cutting through the early morning silence across every speaker on base. "This is Captain Laura Bennett. Fort Davidson is under attack. All personnel implement lockdown protocol immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Armed hostiles have breached the perimeter. Secure your positions and await further orders." She released the button and immediately moved to the kitchen supply closet. Behind cases of canned goods and industrial-sized bags of flour, she found what she remembered seeing during her first week, an emergency weapons locker. It was small, intended for worst-case scenarios, containing 2 M4 rifles and ammunition. Laura checked the first weapon with practiced efficiency, her hands moving through the motions she'd performed thousands of times. Private Martinez burst through the kitchen door, his eyes wide. "Ma'am, what's happening?" "I heard gunfire and then your voice on the "We're under attack," Laura said calmly, loading a magazine into the rifle. "How many people are in the building?" Martinez's face had gone pale, but he straightened his shoulders. "Just us, ma'am. Maybe 4 or 5 early risers in the dining area, getting coffee from the self-serve station. Everyone else is still in barracks. Get them into the walk-in freezer." It's the most secure room we have. Solid walls, one entry point. Move fast, but keep them quiet. Yes, ma'am. Martinez started to leave, then turned back. Captain? I knew you weren't just a cook. Laura allowed herself the briefest smile. Go, now. She moved to the windows, staying low, using the industrial refrigerators as cover. Through the glass, she could now see more clearly what was happening. A truck had crashed through a section of the perimeter fence on the eastern side. Armed figures in civilian clothes were spreading out across the base, moving with military precision toward key buildings. This wasn't random. This was planned. Her mind raced through possibilities. Domestic terrorists targeting a military installation. A coordinated attack by some extremist group. Maybe even a training exercise gone catastrophically wrong, though the live ammunition ruled that out. Whatever the reason, the result was the same hostile forces on American soil, attacking sleeping soldiers. The security office made sense now. They would have hit it first, taking out communications and any immediate armed response. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed a training base would be soft, that everyone would be caught sleeping, that there wouldn't be anyone with combat experience ready to respond. They hadn't counted on the cook. Laura watched as 3 attackers moved toward the barracks complex where Lieutenant Crawford and his fellow junior officers were housed. She could see what was about to happen. Doors kicked in, soldiers caught in their beds. Chaos and casualties before any organized defense could form. She couldn't let that happen. Moving quickly to the kitchen side door, Laura stepped out into the cool morning air. The sky was pink and orange now, sunrise painting the desert in warm colors that contrasted sharply with the violence erupting across the base. She could hear shouting in the distance, more gunfire, the sound of breaking glass. She sprinted toward the barracks, using vehicles and equipment as cover, her shoulder protesting but holding up. The 3 attackers were 50 yards ahead, moving toward the main entrance of the building. They hadn't seen her yet. Laura dropped to a knee behind a parked jeep, brought the rifle to her shoulder, and took a breath. 20 years of training, 3 combat tours, countless hours on shooting ranges. Her hands were steady. Her vision was clear. Federal officer, she shouted. Drop your weapons. The 3 attackers spun toward her voice. For a moment, time seemed to slow. She could see their faces registering surprise, confusion that someone was confronting them, that their plan was already falling apart. They made the wrong choice. The first attacker raised his weapon. Laura fired 3 controlled shots, sent her mass, exactly as she'd been trained. He went down. The second attacker dove for cover behind a trash container, returning fire. Bullets sparked off the Jeep's hood near Laura's position. She rolled right, came up behind a concrete barrier, and fired again. 2 shots, both hitting their target. The third attacker ran, abandoning his fallen companions, sprinting back toward the breached fence. Laura let him go, her attention already shifting to the bigger picture. How many more were there? What were their objectives? Where was the organized response from base security? The barracks door burst open, and Lieutenant Crawford stumbled out, barefoot and wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. His face was a mask of confusion and fear. Behind him, other young officers were emerging, awakened by the gunfire just outside their building. Crawford's eyes found Laura, found the rifle in her hands, found the 2 bodies on the ground. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Get back inside, Laura ordered, her voice sharp with authority. Secure the doors, barricade yourselves in, and stay away from windows. Do it now, Lieutenant. For once in his life, Danny Crawford followed orders without question. Laura heard engines in the distance, more vehicles approaching from multiple directions. This wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. She keyed the radio mic, clipped to her collar, switching to the emergency frequency. Any security personnel, this is Captain Bennett. I have hostile forces across the base. At least one vehicle breach on the eastern perimeter. Multiple armed attackers. I need a status report, and I need it now. Static answered her. Then, finally, a voice crackled through. Captain, this is Sergeant Hayes, security. Our main office is compromised. Multiple casualties. We're trying to organize a response, but we're scattered. What's your position? Center of base, between mess hall and officer barracks. I've engaged and neutralized 2 hostiles. More are inbound. We need to. The explosion cut her off. A massive fireball erupted from the direction of the vehicle depot, the blast wave rattling windows across the base. Black smoke billowed into the morning sky. Laura's jaw clenched. This wasn't just an attack. This was an attempt to cripple the base entirely, to destroy vehicles, cut communications, and create maximum chaos. And right now, she might be the only experienced combat officer in a position to do anything about it. She thought about Crawford's mocking words from earlier in the week. Washed up enlisted who couldn't cut it in the field. Time to show them what a washed-up soldier could do. The smoke from the vehicle depot created a dark pillar against the dawn sky. Laura could hear screaming now, shouts of confusion and pain echoing across Fort Davidson. The base was descending into chaos, and every second that passed meant more lives at risk. She sprinted back toward the mess hall, her mind working through tactical problems with the cold efficiency of her combat years. The attackers had achieved surprise, but they'd also scattered their forces. That was either brilliant strategy or a critical mistake, depending on how the defenders responded. Inside the mess hall, she found Private Martinez and 6 other soldiers, all young, all terrified, but standing and waiting for orders. They'd moved the civilian staff and early breakfast visitors into the walk-in freezer as instructed. Now they stood in the kitchen, looking at Laura like she was their only hope, because right now, she was. Listen carefully, Laura said, her voice calm and clear. We are under attack by an organized hostile force. They've hit security, communications, and vehicle storage. That means they're trying to trap us here, keep us from calling for help or mounting an evacuation. But they've also divided their attention, which gives us an opportunity. A young private named Collins spoke up, his voice shaking. Ma'am, what do we do? We're just trainees. Most of us haven't even. You're United States soldiers. Laura cut him off, not harshly but firmly. And right now, you're all I've got. Are you going to hide in this kitchen while your brothers and sisters are under fire, or are you going to stand with me? The words landed like a physical force. She watched their faces change, watched fear give way to something else. Determination, purpose, maybe even pride. Martinez straightened first, then the others followed. We're with you, Captain, Martinez said. Laura nodded. Good. Martinez, Collins, you 2 head to the armory. It's 2 buildings east. If the attackers were smart, they've already hit it, but check anyway. We need weapons and body armor for everyone who can shoot. Move fast and stay low. They ran without hesitation. The rest of you, start barricading the entrances. Use everything: tables, chairs, equipment. This building sits at the center of base, which means it can serve as a rallying point. We hold here. We give everyone a place to fall back to. As the soldiers moved to follow her orders, Laura returned to the communication panel. She tried multiple emergency frequencies, finally getting through to what sounded like the county sheriff's office 40 miles away. This is Captain Laura Bennett, United States Army, Fort Davidson. We are under armed attack. Multiple hostiles on base. Casualties reported. We need immediate backup. State police, FBI, National Guard. Everything you can send. The dispatcher's voice came back shocked and confused. Did you say attack? Ma'am, Are you certain? I have bodies on the ground and a vehicle depot in flames, Laura snapped. Yes, I'm certain. Get help here now and notify Joint Base Andrews. Tell them Fort Davidson has fallen under hostile action. She didn't wait for confirmation, switching back to the base frequency. All personnel, this is Captain Bennett. The mess hall is now our rally point. If you can move safely, fall back to this position. We are establishing a defensive perimeter. Security personnel, report your status and positions. Responses started coming in, fragmented and chaotic, but coming nonetheless. Sergeant Hayes had gathered 4 security officers in the administration building. 2 instructors reported they'd secured the training center with about 20 officer candidates. A maintenance crew had locked down the supply warehouse. Scattered, but not broken. That was something. Lieutenant Crawford's voice crackled over the radio, and for the first time since Laura had met him, there was no arrogance in it. Captain Bennett, this is Lieutenant Crawford. I have 15 officers in barracks building. See, we heard your broadcast. What are your orders? Laura felt a grim satisfaction. Crisis had a way of stripping away pretense, revealing what people truly were. Crawford, you're closest to the communications tower. If we can get that tower back online, we can coordinate with off-base military resources. Can you reach it? Ma'am, that's 200 yards across open ground. The attackers have taken position in. I didn't ask for a situation report, Lieutenant. I asked if you can reach it. A pause. Then, yes, ma'am. We can reach it. Then do it. Take 5 men, move fast, and get that tower secured. We need communications restored in the next 10 minutes, or we're fighting this battle blind. Understood. Moving now. Martinez and Collins returned, their arms loaded with rifles, ammunition, and tactical vests. Behind them came Sergeant Hayes and his security team, looking battered but operational. Hayes was a stocky man in his 50s. Career military, with a bleeding gash across his forehead. He took in the scene. Laura organizing defenses, soldiers following her orders, the mess hall transforming into a command post, and something shifted in his expression. Captain, he said, his voice rough. I didn't know you were. I thought you were just temporary kitchen. I'm whatever I need to be. Sergeant, Laura said, cutting through his awkwardness. Right now, I need you to tell me what we're facing. How many attackers? What's their objective? Hayes pulled out a tactical map of the base and spread it on a table. Best estimate 15 to 20 hostiles. They breached here, here, and here. He pointed to 3 locations on the perimeter. They've taken out our main security office, hit the vehicle depot, and they're moving toward the armory and the communications tower. I think they're trying to capture or kill the senior officers and hold the base hostage. They didn't count on resistance, Laura said. No, ma'am. They counted on surprise and panic. But you threw them off schedule when you sounded the alarm. Hayes looked at her with new respect. That probably saved 20 lives right there. An explosion rocked the building, smaller than the first but close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Through the window, Laura saw smoke rising from the direction of the communications tower. Crawford's voice came over the radio, strained and urgent. We're pinned down. 3 hostiles between us and the tower, and they've got heavy weapons. We can't... Crawford, listen to me, Laura interrupted, her voice cutting through his panic. You're an officer in the United States Army. Those soldiers with you are looking to you for leadership. Now get your head straight and figure out a way through. Another voice came on the channel, calmer. Ma'am, this is 2nd Lieutenant Barnes. I'm with Crawford. If we can get covering fire from your position, we can flank them using the equipment shed for cover. Laura looked at Hayes. Can you make that shot from here? Hayes moved to the window, assessed the angle and distance, and nodded. I can suppress them, but I can't guarantee hits at this range. Suppression is enough. Crawford, Barnes on my mark. You move. Sergeant Hayes will keep their heads down. You get to that tower, and you get it operational. Understood? Yes, ma'am, Barnes replied. Laura counted down, and Hayes opened fire. The distinctive crack of rifle shots echoed across the base. Through binoculars, Laura watched Crawford and his team sprint from cover, moving with decent tactical spacing toward the communications tower. They were halfway there when one of the attackers popped up and fired. One of Crawford's team went down, clutching his leg. Crawford hesitated for just a moment. Then he turned back, grabbed his fallen comrade, and dragged him forward. Maybe there was hope for the lieutenant after all. They made it, Hayes reported. They're inside the tower building. Laura allowed herself one breath of relief. Then she turned to address the growing number of soldiers who had made it to the mess hall, drawn by her orders, looking to her for leadership, looking to the cook who turned out to be something very different. All right, she said. Now we stop running. Now we stop running. Now we take our base back. The mess hall had transformed into a war room. Maps covered the tables, soldiers checked weapons and ammunition. And Laura stood at the center of it all, coordinating movements with the calm precision of someone who'd done this before in places far more dangerous than Nevada. Sergeant Hayes had taken on the role of her second in command. Without any formal declaration, he simply started anticipating her needs, organizing supplies, and ensuring her orders were carried out. The initial awkwardness about her kitchen assignment had evaporated completely, replaced by the respect of one combat veteran for another. Captain, we've got eyes on the main attacker position, Hayes said, pointing to a map. They fortified the security building, and they're using it as a base of operations. Best count is 8 hostiles, armed with automatic weapons and explosives. Laura studied the map, her mind working through angles of approach. What about our casualty count? 3 confirmed dead, 7 wounded, all stable. Could have been a lot worse if you hadn't acted when you did. Through the window, Laura could see the sun fully risen now, bright and harsh across the desert landscape. What should have been a normal Thursday morning at a training facility had turned into a battlefield. But the initial shock was wearing off, and her people were starting to fight back. Crawford's voice crackled over the radio. Captain Bennett, we've got the communications tower back online. I'm in contact with Joint Base Andrews. They're scrambling a response team, but they're 40 minutes out. State police are 20 minutes away. 20 minutes? A lifetime in combat. Good work, Crawford, Laura replied. Now patch me through to whoever's commanding that response team. I need to coordinate our actions before they arrive. While she waited for the connection, Private Martinez approached with a tablet computer. Ma'am, I got the security cameras working. You can see most of the base from here. Laura took the tablet and scrolled through different camera feeds. What she saw confirmed her tactical instincts. The attackers had strong positions, but they were no longer advancing. They'd achieved their initial objectives: neutralize security, create chaos, secure key buildings. But now they were stuck. They couldn't complete whatever their ultimate goal was because the base hadn't collapsed into helpless panic. Because one person had refused to hide in the kitchen. A new voice came over the radio, deep and authoritative. This is Colonel Marcus Wright, Tactical Response Division. Who am I speaking with? Captain Laura Bennett, Colonel. I'm currently Senior Officer in Effective Command at Fort Davidson. A pause. Captain, my records show a Captain Bennett assigned to that facility, but listed as on medical light duty. Is that you? Yes, sir. Light duty ended about an hour ago when someone started shooting. She heard what might have been a chuckle. Understood, Captain. Give me a sitrep. Laura provided a concise summary of the situation: attacker positions, friendly forces, casualties, current defensive setup. Colonel Wright listened without interruption, then spoke with unmistakable approval. "Captain, you've done outstanding work stabilizing the situation. However, I need you to hold position and wait for our arrival. Do not attempt any offensive action. Let us handle the hostile elimination when we arrive." Laura looked around the mess hall at the soldiers who'd rallied to her command. She thought about the 3 bodies outside, the wounded soldiers in the medical area, the young men and women who'd been attacked in their sleep on American soil. With respect, "Colonel, I have a better idea." She laid out her plan quickly and efficiently. It was risky, maybe even reckless, but it played to their strengths: knowledge of the terrain, defensive positions already established, and the element of surprise. The attackers thought they were facing scared trainees. They were about to learn otherwise. Colonel Wright was quiet for a long moment. "Captain, what you're proposing violates every doctrine about waiting for proper tactical support." "Yes, sir." "It does. It could also save lives and end this situation before those attackers decide to start executing hostages or blow up more facilities." "Yes, sir, it could." Another pause. "You have 20 minutes, Captain. If your plan isn't executed by then, you stand down and let my team handle it." "Clear?" "Crystal clear, Colonel." "Bennett out." Laura turned to address the soldiers assembled in the mess hall. 38 men and women, ranging from teenagers fresh out of basic training to grizzled veterans like Sergeant Hayes. They'd come here expecting a normal duty station, a place to train and learn. Instead, they'd been thrown into combat, and they were looking at her to lead them through it. "Listen up," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "In 18 minutes, the cavalry arrives. But we're not going to sit here and wait. We're going to take back our base, and we're going to show these attackers what happens when you mess with American soldiers." She outlined the plan quickly. 3 teams, 3 approaches, coordinated assault on a security building where the main attacker force had dug in. It relied on timing, discipline, and courage. They had all 3. "I won't lie to you," Laura continued. "This is dangerous. But every minute we wait is a minute those attackers have to hurt more people or escape. We end this now. We end it together. Questions?" Lieutenant Crawford stepped forward. Gone was the cocky young officer who'd mocked her in the breakfast line. His face was smudged with dirt and smoke, his eyes sharp with newfound purpose. "Ma'am, I'll lead the Eastern approach team," he said. Laura nodded. "Hayes, you take the Western approach. I'll take the main team through the center. We move in 12 minutes. Check your equipment, double-check your ammunition, and remember your training. No heroics, no individual glory. We work as a team, and we all come home." The next 10 minutes passed in controlled chaos. Soldiers prepared weapons, reviewed maps, received their assignments. Laura moved among them, offering quiet words of encouragement, checking readiness, making eye contact with each person who would be putting their life on the line. She found Martinez loading magazines with shaking hands. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You can stay here and guard the civilians. No one would think less of you." Martinez looked up, and despite his fear, his voice was steady. "Ma'am, you could have stayed in that kitchen. You could have hidden until help arrived. But you didn't. None of us are going to let you do this alone." Laura felt something tighten in her chest, an emotion she rarely allowed herself to feel: pride. Not in herself, but in these soldiers. These young people who'd risen to meet an impossible situation. "Then let's go show them what we're made of," she said. They moved out in coordinated teams, using every bit of cover the base provided. Laura led her team through a maintenance corridor, coming up behind the security building from an angle the attackers wouldn't expect. Through her earpiece, she heard Crawford reporting his team in position. Then Hayes confirming the same. 3 teams, 1 objective. And 18 minutes before the official cavalry arrived. All teams. This is Bennett, Laura said softly into her radio. On my mark. 3.2.1 mark. They moved as one unit, emerging from cover, weapons up, advancing with precision. The attackers in the security building reacted with surprise, trying to reposition, but they were caught in the crossfire from 3 directions. Laura's team reached the building's rear entrance. She signaled for flashbangs, counted down, then kicked the door open. The flash and concussion of the grenades disoriented the attackers inside, and her team flowed into the building like water, clearing rooms with textbook precision. It was over in 90 seconds. When the shooting stopped, Laura stood in what used to be the base security office, surveying 6 captured attackers lying face down with their hands bound behind their backs. Through the windows, she could see Crawford and Hayes securing the perimeter, their teams having performed flawlessly. Colonel Wright's voice came over the radio. Captain Bennett, we're 5 minutes out. Report status. Laura allowed herself a small smile. Target secured, Colonel. Hostiles neutralized or captured. Fort Davidson is back under friendly control. You can slow down. We've got coffee waiting for you. The mess hall erupted in cheers that she could hear even from 2 buildings away. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across Fort Davidson as VI agents, military investigators, and a small army of reporters filled the base. The attackers had turned out to be members of a domestic terrorist group with some convoluted plan to steal weapons and make a statement about government overreach. Their plan had failed spectacularly, and now they sat in federal custody, facing charges that would put them away for life. Laura stood outside the mess hall, finally allowing herself a moment of exhaustion. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd re-aggravated the injury during the morning's action. Her uniform was stained with smoke and dirt. But she was alive, and more importantly, so were most of her soldiers. Colonel Wright approached, a distinguished African-American officer in his 50s with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons. He stopped in front of Laura and extended his hand. Captain Bennett, he said, what you did here today was nothing short of remarkable. Laura shook his hand. I just did my job, sir. These soldiers did the real work. That's what every good leader says. Wright replied with a knowing smile. I've been reviewing your service record. 3 combat tours, commendations for valor, multiple field operations. Yet somehow you were stuck in a kitchen during your recovery assignment. Someone needed to cook, sir. Wright's expression turned serious. Captain, I'm putting you in for a medal. What you did organizing a defense under fire, coordinating inexperienced personnel, conducting an assault operation against entrenched hostiles, that's not just doing your job. That's exceptional leadership under impossible circumstances. Laura felt uncomfortable with the praise. Sir, I'm just glad it worked out. If we'd lost people because of my decisions, but you didn't, Wright interrupted gently. You made hard calls, took calculated risks, and brought your people home. That's what leadership looks like. Movement caught Laura's eye, and she saw Lieutenant Crawford approaching, walking with Lieutenant Barnes and several other young officers. They stopped a respectful distance away, waiting to be acknowledged. Excuse me, Colonel, Laura said, then walked over to meet them. Crawford stood at attention. His earlier cockiness had been replaced by something far more valuable, humility born from real experience. Ma'am, he began, his voice formal but sincere. I wanted to apologize for how I treated you this week. I was disrespectful, ignorant, and completely out of line. I judged you based on your assignment instead of your character, and I'm ashamed of that. Laura studied the young lieutenant. He'd performed well under fire once given proper direction. He dragged a wounded soldier to safety. He'd led his team successfully when it mattered. There was potential there, if he could learn from this. "Lieutenant," she said, "do you know why I didn't correct you when you called me cook?" Crawford shook his head. "Because titles and rank don't make you a leader. Your actions do. You needed to learn that lesson, and no amount of me telling you would have taught it. Today taught it to you." "Yes, ma'am." "It certainly did. You did good work today, Crawford. You stepped up when it counted. Remember this feeling, the responsibility you felt for your team, the fear that you might let them down, the pride when they succeeded. That's what real leadership feels like. It's not about swagger or confidence tricks. It's about service." Crawford's eyes were suspiciously bright. "I understand, ma'am. And I won't forget." Barnes stepped forward. "Captain, all of us wanted to say thank you. You saved our lives today. You're everything we should aspire to be." Laura felt that tightness in her chest again. "You all did the saving, Lieutenant. I just pointed you in the right direction." Sergeant Hayes appeared with Private Martinez and the other soldiers who'd been with Laura from the beginning. They stood together, enlisted and officers, young and old, united by what they'd survived together. "Ma'am," Hayes said gruffly, "we took a vote. We want to formally request that when you're cleared for full duty, you're assigned as our training officer. We figure if we're going to learn from anyone, might as well be the officer who fought off an invasion before breakfast." Laughter rippled through the group, easing the tension that still lingered from the morning's violence. Laura looked at their faces, these soldiers who'd trusted her, followed her, fought beside her. In their eyes, she saw something that no amount of medals or commendations could provide: genuine respect, earned not through rank, but through shared hardship and proven leadership. "I'd be honored," she said simply. The next few hours passed in a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and paperwork. The media was calling it the Fort Davidson defense, and Laura's name was being mentioned alongside words like hero and extraordinary. She deflected as much of it as she could, always redirecting praise to the soldiers who'd fought with her as evening fell. Laura finally found herself back in the mess hall, now empty and quiet. The coffee makers hummed softly. The smell of tonight's dinner preparation drifted from the kitchen. In a few hours, soldiers would file through for their meals, life returning to something resembling normal. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at one of the tables, letting exhaustion finally settle over her. Her phone buzzed with messages from family, friends, and fellow officers who'd heard about the attack. She'd respond eventually, but for now, she just wanted a moment of peace. The door opened and Colonel Wright entered, followed by a woman in a civilian suit who carried herself with military bearing. "Captain Bennett," Wright said. "This is General Patricia Morrison, Fort Davidson's commanding officer." General Morrison had been off base at a conference when the attack occurred, and her face showed the weight of command, the knowledge that her installation had been breached and her soldiers endangered while she was away. Laura stood and saluted. Morrison returned it crisply, then did something unexpected. She extended her hand. "Captain Bennett," Morrison said, her voice carrying the distinctive accent of Georgia. "I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing footage, reading reports, and interviewing personnel. What you accomplished here today is nothing short of extraordinary. Thank you, ma'am. I'm just grateful we were able to contain the situation." Morrison's eyes were sharp and assessing. "I also reviewed your assignment here. Medical light duty, kitchen supervision. That was my decision, made based on a recommendation from your previous commanding officer who felt you needed time away from operational stress." Laura remained silent, unsure where this was going. "That officer," Morrison continued, "wrote in his evaluation that you were emotionally exhausted and needed administrative work to decompress. He made it sound like you were burned out. Captain, like you'd lost your edge. Ma'am, Morrison held up a hand. Today proved that assessment was not just wrong. It was dangerously incompetent. You didn't lose your edge. You never did. You're exactly the kind of officer we need leading soldiers, not cooking their breakfast. Colonel Wright nodded. General Morrison and I have discussed your future, Captain. How would you feel about a transfer to the Tactical Response Division? We need experienced officers who can think under pressure and lead in crisis situations. Your actions today proved you're overqualified for that role. Laura felt the weight of the offer. It was a significant opportunity, a chance to work at the highest levels of military readiness. But she looked around the mess hall, thinking about Crawford and Martinez and all the young soldiers who'd fought beside her. That's a generous offer, sir, she said carefully. But if it's all the same, I'd like to stay here at Fort Davidson. These soldiers today, they had raw talent, courage, and determination, but they lacked experience and confidence. I think I can help with that. Train them properly. Prepare them for the reality of service, not just the textbook version. General Morrison smiled, a genuine expression of approval. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for, Captain. Fort Davidson is a training facility. We're supposed to be preparing the next generation of officers and enlisted personnel. But somewhere along the way, we'd gotten soft-focused too much on regulations and procedures. Not enough on real leadership and combat readiness. She walked to the window, looking out at the base where repair crews were already working to fix the damage from the morning's attack. I'm creating a new position, Morrison said. Director of Field Training and Combat Readiness. You'll design and implement realistic training scenarios, teach leadership under pressure, and make sure every soldier who goes through Fort Davidson understands what it means to serve. You'll have authority to reshape our entire training curriculum. Laura felt her heart rate increase. This was more than just vindication. It was an opportunity to make a real difference. To take the lessons she'd learned in 3 combat tours and pass them on to soldiers who might need them someday. I accept. Ma'am, she said. Morrison turned back, her expression serious. There's one more thing, Captain. I'm also promoting you to Major, effective immediately. Your actions today demonstrated command capability at a level far beyond your current rank. Congratulations, Major Bennett. Laura felt the moment's significance wash over her. Not just the promotion, though that meant a great deal, but the recognition of what she'd accomplished. The validation that she wasn't washed up or burned out, that she still had value and purpose. Thank you, General, she managed. Her voice thick with emotion she rarely allowed herself to show. I won't let you down. You couldn't if you tried, Morrison replied. Now go get some rest. That's an order. After the General and Colonel Wright left, Laura sat back down with her coffee. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the messages until she found one from her sister back in Ohio. Saw the news. Are you okay? Call me when you can. Laura smiled and typed back, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Today reminded me why I do this job. Love you. She hit send and was about to put the phone away when it buzzed again. This time, it was a group message to all base personnel from General Morrison. To everyone at Fort Davidson. Today, we faced an attack on our home, our soldiers, and our mission. We prevailed because of the courage, discipline, and leadership demonstrated by every person who stood their ground. Special recognition to Major Laura Bennett, recently promoted for her exceptional command under fire. She exemplifies the best of what it means to serve. Tomorrow we begin repairs. Tomorrow we resume our mission. But tonight, be proud of what you accomplished. You defended your brothers and sisters, your base, and your country. Well done, soldiers. General Morrison. Laura felt tears threatening and blinked them back. She'd spent so many years proving herself, fighting to be taken seriously, dealing with assumptions and dismissals. 1 week ago, she'd been just a cook. Invisible and underestimated. Today, she was a major, about to reshape how the Army trained its future leaders. The mess hall door opened again, and this time it was Private Martinez, carrying a covered plate. "Ma'am, main major," he said with a grin. "I figured you haven't eaten all day. Made you a sandwich. Turkey with extra pickles, the way I saw you make it for yourself yesterday morning." Laura laughed, genuinely touched. "You paid attention to how I make my sandwiches? Ma'am, after today, I'm paying attention to everything you do. You're the reason I'm alive, and the reason I believe I can actually be a good soldier someday. You already are, Martinez. You already are." He set the plate down and started to leave, then turned back. "Can I ask you something, Major?" "Go ahead. Why didn't you ever tell Lieutenant Crawford who you really were? Why did you let him treat you that way?" Laura considered the question carefully. "Because Martinez, the moment you start demanding respect based on rank or credentials, you've already lost something important. Real respect, the kind that matters, has to be earned through your actions, not your title." Crawford and the others learned that lesson today. They learned that someone's worth isn't determined by their current assignment or what uniform they're wearing. It's determined by what they do when it matters most. Martinez nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom. "I get it. You were teaching us even when we didn't know we needed to learn. That's what good leaders do, Martinez. They teach by example, especially when nobody's watching." After Martinez left, Laura finally allowed herself to relax. She bit into the sandwich and looked around the mess hall one more time. This room had been her domain for the past week, a place where she'd been dismissed and underestimated. But it had also been the place where she'd proven herself, where she'd rallied soldiers and saved lives. She thought about all the people who doubted her over the years, all the times she'd been overlooked or pushed aside. Every setback, every dismissal, every moment of being underestimated had led her here. To this moment, to this victory. The door opened once more. And this time, it was Lieutenant Crawford, still in his dirty combat uniform, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Major Bennett," he said formally, "may I join you?" Laura gestured to the seat across from her. Crawford sat down, slid one of the coffee cups across to her, and was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking all afternoon," he finally said, "about every stupid thing I said to you this week. The jokes, the complaints, the disrespect. I keep coming back to one question. Why didn't you put me in my place? You could have destroyed me with one word. Instead, you just made fresh coffee." Laura took a sip from the cup he'd brought. It was perfectly brewed, she noticed. He'd been paying attention. "Lieutenant, do you know what the hardest part of leadership is?" "No, ma'am. It's knowing when to speak and when to let people learn through consequences. You weren't going to learn respect from me telling you to respect me. You needed to discover for yourself what real competence looks like, what real leadership requires. Today gave you that opportunity." Crawford looked down at his coffee. "I was terrified out there. When we were pinned down by that tower, when Barnes got hit, I froze. I didn't know what to do. But you figured it out," Laura said. "You pushed through the fear, you made decisions, and you brought your team home. That's what matters. Only because you were there, giving orders, keeping me focused." "This time," Laura acknowledged. "But next time, you'll do it on your own. And the time after that, you'll teach someone else. That's how it works. We're all part of a chain, Crawford. Today I pulled you forward. Tomorrow, you'll do the same for someone else." Crawford met her eyes, and in his face she could see the transformation that had occurred. The cocky, untested lieutenant from this morning was gone. replaced by someone who'd been forged by fire and emerged stronger. I want to be the kind of officer you are. Major, I want soldiers to look at me the way they look at you today. Laura smiled. Then do the work. Show up every day and be someone worth following. Treat every assignment, even the unglamorous ones, like it matters, because they all do. And never, ever underestimate people based on where they're standing or what job they're doing. That's how you miss the fact that the cook is actually a combat veteran who's about to save your life. Crawford laughed, some of the tension finally leaving his shoulders. Lesson learned, ma'am. Lesson definitely learned. They sat together in comfortable silence. Two soldiers drinking coffee in a mess hall that had become hallowed ground. Outside, the sun was setting over Fort Davidson, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Repair crews worked by floodlight, already erasing the physical evidence of the day's violence. But the memories would remain. The lessons would endure. And Major Laura Bennett, who just yesterday had been dismissed as just a cook, would spend the rest of her career making sure that every soldier who passed through Fort Davidson understood one fundamental truth. Your worth isn't determined by others' perceptions. It's proven by your actions when everything is on the line. She finished her coffee, feeling the exhaustion finally pulling her towards sleep, but also feeling something else, a deep satisfaction, a sense of purpose renewed. Tomorrow she would begin her new role, reshaping training programs and teaching leadership. But tonight, she would rest, knowing that when she'd been needed most, she hadn't hidden in the kitchen. She'd taken command. She'd ended the ambush. And she'd reminded everyone at Fort Davidson, including herself, that you should never, ever underestimate the quiet professional standing behind the serving line, stirring the oatmeal, and watching everything with the eyes of a warrior, because that cook might just be the person who saves your life. The end.